Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you? Honey? Daniel's voice was warm, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that didn't settle right in your gut. Like a bad feeling that you couldn't shake off, no matter how hard you tried. I paused, my fingers wrapped around the delicate porcelain of my coffee cup. My mind racing. Something about the way he looked at me, so casual, so innocent, felt wrong. A chill ran down my spine. But I pushed the feeling away. I was sitting at my sister-in-law Laura's elegant dining table. A place I'd come to know too well over the past 3 years of marriage. This was supposed to be a routine family brunch. The kind we had every month, simple, easy, filled with the laughter and chatter that came with family gatherings. But today was different. There was something in the air. Something I couldn't put my finger on. But I felt it deep in my bones. The coffee in front of me smelled strange. Almost metallic. As if it had been tainted by something I couldn't quite identify. I took a slow breath, pretending to savor the aroma. But my stomach churned, threatening to betray me. I hadn't told anyone, but for months now, I'd been dealing with episodes, the kind of stomach aches that left me doubled over in pain. The kind that mysteriously appeared every time I was here. I'd brushed it off as food allergies or stress. But now, I wasn't so sure. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Had something happened the last time? Was it possible that it had been intentional? Laura, sitting across from me, stirred her own untouched cup of coffee. Her eyes met mine, and that same cold smile was on her lips. An innocent smile that never seemed to waver. No matter what was going on. James has become quite the barista lately, she said, her voice sugary sweet, a hint of amusement behind it. He's been practicing different brewing methods. Just for you, just for you. The words echoed in my mind like an alarm bell, sending a shiver up my spine. My fingers tightened around the cup, the ceramic cold against my skin. I tried to force a smile, nodding, my heart pounding in my chest. How thoughtful of you, I replied, my voice a little too high-pitched, a little too controlled, but inside, I was unraveling. The smell of the coffee was more than I could ignore now. It wasn't just the scent, it was the feeling it gave me. Like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for something terrible to happen. I thought about the last time I had been here, how I'd ended up in urgent care. The doctors baffled, unable to explain my symptoms. Just something you ate, they'd said. That's what they always said. That's what James always said. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just coincidence. Something wasn't right. I forced myself to lift the cup, pretending to take a sip. But I only brought it to my lips and paused. I could see it now, the way Laura was watching me. Her eyes narrowing just slightly, as if she were waiting for something. Waiting for me to take that first drink. I didn't drink it. Instead, I looked at Daniel, studying him carefully. His smile remained fixed, his eyes never leaving mine. But there was a flicker there. Something unreadable, something I couldn't quite catch. He had become so careful, so meticulous, over the past few months. So distant. I had seen him talking to Laura more often, whispering things to her when he thought I wasn't looking. The small, fleeting glances they exchanged. The conversations that paused when I entered the room. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I was blind. But I wasn't, and neither was Laura. I stood up suddenly, making an excuse about needing to make a quick call. Oh, would you look at that? I need to call work, I said, my voice trembling just a little. Nina, would you mind if I use your study? I didn't wait for an answer. I knew she would say yes. And as I walked past her, I let my hand brush the edge of her cup, pretending to stumble, allowing the cups to swap in the confusion of my movements. I'm so sorry, I said, straightening up quickly, trying to mask the pounding of my heart. I'm such a klutz sometimes. Nina waved it off with a tight smile. Just try not to break anything in the study, she said. Her words, as light as they were, sent a shiver through me. I nodded, my stomach twisting with anxiety. I had to wait and watch. As I walked down the hallway and into the study, I turned back just in time to see Laura lift the coffee cup to her lips. My breath hitched, my pulse quickened. I stood frozen in the doorway. the door slightly ajar, my heart pounding as I watched her sip. The same way I had pretended to earlier. What would happen now? Would she fall for it? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. I watched as Laura slowly brought the cup to her lips, her eyes never leaving mine. A chill ran down my spine. And for a brief moment, I wondered if she had caught on. Could she possibly know what I had done? I had switched the cups, nothing too obvious. Nothing too dramatic. Just a quick, subtle exchange while pretending to stumble. But was it enough? Had I been too obvious? She took a sip. The seconds stretched out like hours. My heart pounding in my chest. Nothing. She didn't even flinch. I fought the urge to rush back into the room. To stop her. But I stayed still, watching from the doorway of the study. My breath was shallow, and my hands clenched into fists. I had to know. I had to be sure. Laura set the cup down. Her gaze still fixed on me. There was something in her expression. Something almost too calm. Too certain. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. I tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. But it twisted painfully as I noticed Daniel's eyes flicker nervously between us. Then quickly glance over at me. I couldn't look away. Was she pretending? Was she waiting for something? I wanted to scream at her to stop drinking. To tell her that she was playing right into my hand. But instead, I gripped the doorframe, forcing myself to stay still as the moment played out. Daniel broke the silence. His voice casual but his concern palpable. "You all right, babe?" he asked, his tone pretending to be concerned. But his eyes betrayed him. Darting between me and Laura, and then back to me. The room fell silent for just a beat longer than it should have. And then it happened. Laura's hand trembled ever so slightly. At first, it was so subtle, I thought I might have imagined it. But then it happened again. Her fingers shook involuntarily as she set the cup down on the table. Her face, pale and strained, told me everything I needed to know. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A sickening sense of triumph surged through me, followed almost immediately by a wave of dread. I had been right all along. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't just another coincidence. The look on Daniel's face confirmed it. Something had been planned. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. But there was no turning back now. Laura shifted in her seat. Her breath shallow. Her face now a mask of confusion and fear. She stared down at her cup. Then back up at me. As though trying to piece everything together in that fleeting moment. I saw her lips move, just a whisper. "Daniel, what did you put in that coffee?" The words hit me like a freight train. My body tensed, my heart racing as I heard them spill out of her trembling mouth. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't an accident. This was real. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you. My amazing viewers, where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I forced calmness into my voice as I spoke. Despite the chaos swirling inside, "I think we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. And just like that, the calm facade of family brunch shattered. Laura's hand trembled as she set the cup down, her face slowly draining of color. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then back at me, her eyes wide with something I couldn't place. The cool, controlled facade she always wore was cracking. And I could see her struggle to understand what was happening. I stood frozen, watching her. The silence in the room felt deafening. Daniel, noticing the shift, quickly looked between us, his face tightening with panic. "Nina, what's going on?" he asked. His voice shaky, but it was Laura who spoke first. Her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, what did you put in that coffee?" The words hung in the air. And I knew instantly, everything I had suspected. Every uneasy feeling was true. This wasn't an accident. It was planned. They had been orchestrating this from the start. Daniel stammered, trying to cover up, but the panic was evident in his voice. "It's nothing, Laura. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Laura's body jerked in her seat as tremors racked her frame. She grabbed the edge of the table, her face twisting with pain. "You switched the cups, didn't you?" she gasped, her eyes now accusing me. I didn't need to say a word. The look on her face told me she understood exactly what had happened. They hadn't meant to poison me. Laura had been the one they targeted all along. As she slumped in her chair, Daniel's face turned white, his attempts to act calm failing miserably. He looked at me, his expression now a mix of fear and disbelief. I was done. This was no longer a game. I quickly dialed 911. My voice steady despite the rising tension. We need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. My sister-in-law is having severe tremors after drinking something she shouldn't have. The reality of the situation hit me like a wave. The plot was exposed, and they couldn't escape it now. But even as the sirens wailed in the distance, part of me knew this was just the beginning. As the minutes stretched on, the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. Laura's body shook violently, her breath coming in short, labored gasps. I could see the panic in her eyes, the understanding that she was no longer in control. She had been a part of this, of their twisted plan. And now, the truth was seeping out, piece by piece. Daniel was beside her now, his hands shaking as he tried to steady her. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered, his voice strained. He looked at me, but there was no conviction in his eyes. Only fear. It was supposed to just make you sick. Nina, not this. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I stood there, watching him crumble, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. His words were a confession. He was admitting it. This whole thing, every meal, every drink, had been a calculated attempt to weaken me, to make me look unreliable. And Laura, so poised and innocent on the outside, had been in on it the entire time. A bitter laugh escaped me, cutting through the tension in the room. You thought I wouldn't notice? I asked, my voice cold and steady despite the storm raging inside me. You thought you could poison me and get away with it? Laura's face twisted in pain. But there was something else there. Something I hadn't expected, guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat, swallowed by the fear now overtaking her. It wasn't the remorse of someone who truly regretted their actions. No, it was the realization that everything had gone wrong. The plan had backfired, and now they were the ones in danger. Daniel glanced at her desperately. Nina, please, you don't understand, he pleaded, his voice cracking. We weren't trying to kill you. We just needed to slow you down. You were too successful. We had to do something to make sure you didn't outshine Laura. The weight of his words hit me like a slap. I hadn't just been poisoned to miss a meeting or a presentation. This had been about something deeper, something far more sinister. They had planned to destroy me professionally, make me appear weak, unreliable, so Laura could take my place. It wasn't just sabotage, it was personal. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to remain calm. You wanted me gone, I said softly, my voice dripping with realization. Not just from the meetings, but from everything. You wanted to see me fail. Daniel's face turned pale, and his mouth went dry as he realized what I had figured out. It wasn't supposed to be this bad, he muttered, his voice cracking with guilt. I stepped back from them, my mind spinning with the implications of everything they'd done. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. They had spent months orchestrating this. They had been poisoning me all along. And now, as Laura's body continued to betray her, it was clear that this was more than just a petty revenge plot. This was a full-on conspiracy to ruin my life. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and for a moment, I felt an odd sense of relief. The ambulance was on its way. The truth would come to light. I didn't have to carry this burden alone anymore. But even as the paramedics arrived and began to tend to Laura, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just walking away from a plot to destroy me. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. One where I wasn't going to let anyone, not even family, tear me down. Call the police, I said firmly, my voice steady despite everything that had happened. We need to make sure they know what happened here. As the paramedics moved Laura, I turned my back to them, focusing instead on the cold, clear reality of what was coming next. They had underestimated me. They had thought I was weak. But now they were going to see just how wrong they were. The hospital was a blur of frantic movement. I followed closely behind the paramedics as they wheeled Laura into the emergency room. My heart still pounding in my chest. The rush of the moment. The chaos. Almost drowned out the thoughts racing through my mind. But one thing was certain. Everything was finally coming to a head. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. I could hear the doctors talking in hushed tones, exchanging worried looks as they tried to stabilize Laura. Her condition was worsening, and I could see the fear in the eyes of the medical team. But as much as I wanted to feel sympathy for her, there was something in me that held back. After everything she had done, after all the pain she had caused, I couldn't find it in myself to care. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. A nurse led me to a small waiting room where I sat, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, as I replayed the events in my head. How long had they been plotting this? How long had they been feeding me poison, trying to destroy everything I had worked for? The lies, the whispers, the carefully crafted facade, it all came crashing down, piece by piece, and through it all, I had been blind to the truth, too trusting, too willing to believe that family would never hurt me. But now, there was no turning back. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, the hospital visits, or even the fear. It was the betrayal, the realization that the people I had trusted most in the world were the ones who had tried to break me. My own husband, my sister-in-law, both of them had conspired to ruin my career, my health, and my life. I had been their pawn in a twisted game of manipulation. The door to the waiting room opened, and a police officer entered. He had a serious expression on his face, and I knew this was the moment everything would change. "Sophia?" he asked, his voice low but firm. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. "Yes? We need to speak to you about the events that transpired today," he said, motioning for me to follow him. "We've already gathered enough evidence to proceed with an investigation, but we need your statement." My mind raced as I followed him down the sterile hallways of the hospital. This was it, the moment when the truth would be laid bare for everyone to see. There was no more hiding, no more excuses. I had the evidence, the recordings, and the texts. The confessions were already in place. Daniel and Laura had no idea what was coming for them. The officer led me into a small room, where a detective was waiting. She introduced herself as Detective Alvarez and gestured for me to sit. "Sophia, we're going to need a full account of everything that happened today. And we'll also need to discuss your previous hospitalizations." I nodded, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I have all the records," I said, pulling out my phone. I had been keeping detailed notes of every incident, every strange reaction, every unexplained illness. I had suspected for months that something was wrong. And now, it was all finally coming to light. The detective looked over the records, her expression hardening as she scanned through the information. "It's clear this wasn't a random occurrence," she said, her tone professional but tinged with disbelief. "The pattern here is unmistakable. We're dealing with a premeditated attempt to harm you." I nodded again, the weight of her words settling heavily on my shoulders. But there was no time to dwell on it. "They've been trying to destroy me for months," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around me. "I have recordings, texts, everything. They've been planning this from the beginning." The detective's eyes flicked to the phone in my hand. "We'll need those. All of it. We'll also need to speak with the hospital about Laura's toxicology results. We believe the substance in her system was intended for you." The air in the room grew thick with the weight of the situation. I knew what was coming. The police were going to take action. They were going to make sure Daniel and Laura faced the consequences for everything they had done. And I would make sure they paid for trying to destroy me. The days that followed were a blur. A whirlwind of legal battles, hospital visits, and paperwork. It felt surreal, watching the people I had once trusted, once loved, now face the consequences of their actions. Daniel and Laura were arrested, their lives unraveled before my eyes. The weight of their betrayal was still heavy. But now there was something else, something stronger: relief. I had spent so many months second-guessing myself, doubting my instincts, believing that maybe, just maybe, I had been imagining things. But now, the truth was undeniable. The evidence was irrefutable. And as I stood in the courtroom, Listening to the prosecutor lay out their case, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. This was justice. This was the moment I had been fighting for. The trial was swift. The verdict inevitable. Daniel and Laura were both convicted on multiple counts, including attempted poisoning and conspiracy. As the judge read the sentencing, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet satisfaction. They had thought they could break me, destroy everything I had worked for. But here I was, stronger than ever. It wasn't about revenge. It never had been. What had happened to me wasn't just about the poison or the physical pain. It was about the trust I had placed in the wrong people. And now, with their plot exposed, I had finally reclaimed that trust. Not just in others, but in myself. A year later, I found myself standing at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference. The room filled with faces of people I once thought would never take me seriously. But now, I was the one they were listening to. I had climbed to the top. And nothing at all, was going to stop me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Henderson account, the account that had fueled Laura and Daniel's desperation to bring me down, had turned into the key to my success. That one deal had catapulted me into the upper echelons of the business world, landing me more clients than I could have ever imagined. And as I stood there, sharing my story with the room, I realized something. The worst thing they had ever done to me had also been the best thing that had ever happened. Success wasn't just about talent or luck. It was about resilience. It was about staying true to who you are, even when the world is trying to tear you apart. As I finished my speech, several young professionals approached me, eager for advice. One woman, her eyes wide with admiration, asked, "How did you keep going after everything that happened? How did you stay so strong?" I smiled, a sense of pride swelling in my chest. I focused on what I could control. I said, I kept going because I knew I had to. And I refused to let fear or betrayal dictate my future. Later that evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing the newest client proposal, I received an email. The Henderson client, the client Laura and Daniel had fought so hard to sabotage, had just renewed their contract for another 3 years. I couldn't help but smile. Everything had come full circle. They had underestimated me. They had tried to break me. But instead, they had made me stronger, more determined than ever. And as the night drew to a close, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on everything I had been through. The trials, the pain, the uncertainty, it had all led me here, to this moment of triumph. I had fought for what I believed in. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Success, after all, is the best revenge. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. If you found this story inspiring or if you've ever faced betrayal and fought your way back, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means everything to us. And we can't wait to share more with you in the future. Stay strong, and keep pushing forward.